Hey guys, in this video we're going to see, what if Nagato gave Naruto the Rinnegan? Naruto x Konan harem. This is part 1, and if you want more then please comment 1 pink emojis. And complete 100 likes. I request you to check out author of this story named The Last One by Mega Darkly. And I have made Naruto impregnate all female ninjas on Patreon, so do check out. All details in description. Let's get in the video. Naruto-san, let us begin your training, Konan said as she sat up from her seated position, wrapping her arm in a bandage. Somehow, she felt a smidge happier from their little heart-to-heart moment. Oh yeah, Naruto shouted giddily. That's what I was going to ask you today. Konan questioned the blonde, befuddled. Ask what? Well, before I found you, I want to find someone to help me with the Rinnegan. Then I thought after a minute and realized you were the only person that was even remotely close to knowing anything about it. But after all of those things that happened today, I sort of forgot, he replied, rubbing the back of his head wryly. Yes, well, we are here now, and we don't have much time to waste, Konan replied in a matter-of-fact tone. Madara far surpasses your strength, and even my own, but we are about to change that. She then finished wrapping her arm and started walking towards the door. The blonde only stared at her, his gaze deep in space, signifying that he was in thought. Naruto-san, Madara is nothing but pure darkness. You, on the other hand, are the child of prophecy. It is said that you will triumph victoriously and make things right in this world gone awry. She then turned to face him in a serious facade. By the time we are done with your training, he will never get his hands on you. I can guarantee it. That response actually lightened his mood a little. A small grin etched across his face as he thought about that aspect. He was actually going to be taught how to use the Rinnegan. It sort of felt strange to him now that he thought about it. He has a Keki-eye Genkai, a special eye that her friend once had. Now that friend is no more, which makes Naruto the new heir to the special power he now possesses. Okay, Konan-chan, I am ready, Naruto replied cheerily. The blue-haired woman looked at him and her features dropped into a frown. Don't call me that, he asked a little confused. You are never to put Chan at the end of my name. Understand? She told him in an angry voice. Just because we have to train together for your benefit, that does not mean that we are best friends. But I thought dash. Well, you thought wrong, she replied with no hesitation. Now let's get going. We do not have much time. She then proceeded out of the door in sort of a hurry. Naruto tried to think as he couldn't figure out what just happened. What is wrong with her? One minute we're friendly, the next she is staring daggers at me. I don't get it. He concentrated for another second or so before he concluded that it would come to him sooner or later. Naruto then followed behind Konan to begin his very first training lesson of the Rinnegan. Another day as the Hokage unfurls, Tsunade replied out in the open at her office desk. It never ceases to amaze me. Tsunade was very annoyed as of late. She had just gotten out of a coma, and the work already piled itself to the ceiling as if it was trying to get her mad on purpose. She had to deal with the unexpected arrival of a former Akatsuki member, which was proving to be more trouble than it was actually worth, but could potentially work into a huge advantage if handled correctly. She had to go through council just to even instate Konan as a leaf ninja. But if the blue-haired woman was willing to help Naruto in any way she could and Naruto felt it best, then there didn't seem to be any reason why she shouldn't do this for her, even if the Hokage didn't want to. It was the way Konan acted towards Tsunade that really tipped the scales in the ex-Akatsuki's favor. The Godame could read people very well, that it was almost a talent because she could pick up and subtle gesture or voice change very easily, just like the third Hokage. That was something that only interrogators were good at. Maybe she should have been a cross-examiner? Easier than being Hokage, she thought with a sigh. She then thought about the blue-haired woman that came in earlier. When she looked at Konan, the look in her eyes and the way she spoke, it was as if she was speaking to another person entirely, if that makes sense. Tsunade could see the loneliness in Konan's eyes, in which her voice didn't betray that emotion at all. Of course, Konan was trying to hide it and doing a good job nonetheless. But that didn't really matter because the Hokage could see straight through the mask that the paper user held onto for a false sense of comfort. Tsunade could see her sadness. Oh, too well. Konan was the last one from the trio that trained under Jiraiya all those years ago, and now that all of her friends are deceased, There was no one else there to help the paper user get over her grief. The Sannin felt a little sad for the woman, even though she helped in the village's total annihilation. But now that Naruto is around her in the village, maybe he will find a friend in Konan and help her. She seemed to hold Naruto in high regard. I think he's safe for now. While in the middle of her thoughts, Yamato and Kakashi appeared in the Godame's office with a poof of smoke, completely disrupting her ruminations. Tsunade looked over in their direction and put a knowing look upon her face. Well, what did you find out? She then intertwined her fingers and laid her elbows on the table, resting her chin on her hands. Right, Yamato replied firmly. Well, we were a little startled at first when we saw it, but the test came back negative. His eyes are real. Yes, it seems Naruto has acquired the true Rinnegan. Kakashi stated seriously, we do not know what to do about the situation, although we do know that it does not have any effect on the last seal concatenating the Kyuubi. Well, at least there is some good news. Good to know Nagato didn't do anything to him. Tsunade responded with a sense of finality. I found it very odd, though. Kakashi started again after a minute's silence. Naruto only has 2 rings on his eyes, but if I remember correctly, the Rinnegan has always covered the entire eye. I've done some research while we were fighting pain, and it says that the Rinnegan covers the whole eye, but Naruto's only goes so far as to cover the irises. Tsunade looked to the ninja, intrigued by his findings. You do make an interesting point. That is why I would like to continue testing him for further evaluation. Yamato answered without a moment's haste. Things seem a little confusing, and for that reason, I want to make sure nothing happens. Tsunade nodded her head in approval. Right. You have my permission to continue watching him for any unusual occurrences, as it would deem unfortunate if something were to happen to Naruto. The Hokage sternly replied. Something was fishy, as things did not definitely add up. What could it be? What was Nagato's purpose? Kakashi then let his eye wander until a hint of blue piqued his interest on the Hokage's desk. There was a folder that was left open, revealing a sizable document and a photo of a person on top. Oh, doing a last-minute Akatsuki report? Kakashi's eye lingered a little longer between the front page and picture before noticing something out of the ordinary. Wait a minute. Is she Dash? That's right, Kakashi. The Godame interrupted. She is a Leaf Jounin. What? Yamato asked before he looked at the photo with the silver hair Jounin. All he heard was Akatsuki, she, and Leaf Jounin. He really wasn't expecting what he saw. You can't be serious? Tsunade looked at the document as well before heaving a soft sigh. Look, Naruto was the one who found her. He seemed to trust her after finding out that Nagato was his cousin, and also, she has no ill will towards Naruto, because we had a Noichi look in her mind and come up with nothing. Kakashi and Yamato stared in, though, as the Sannin continued. I already know what you were thinking. When I first heard that Naruto brought her here, I thought the same thing. I really just wanted to leave here for dead, but Naruto, he had a sense that something was there that no one was seeing. That idiot. He thinks he knows everything. A smile graced her lips as she kept the speech moving. It wasn't until I actually saw her today that I changed my mind. Yamato felt the need to speak after a moment of silence, curious as to what the woman had to say. Well, what made you change your mind? Tsunade looked at the picture again, and then looked at both of the Jounin with her smile fading into a sad one. Naruto did. His attitude about everything. Maybe he felt obligated to protect Konan, since Pain, or Nagato rather, told him that he was his cousin. I do not know. You really wish the better for Naruto, don't you, Lady Tsunade? Kakashi asked in a semi-sorrowful voice, but his stature proved he was sympathetic as well. Yes, but I also know Faye Konan can really help him with his training. She is the only one that really knows anything about the Rinnegan, and plus, on top of that, she seems to trust Naruto to a degree. Tsunade then moved her arms to the desk and turned her eyes to the table as well. What was real strange, though, was while we were in discussion about it with the Jounin leader and the council, Danzo didn't even raise an argument. Actually, he and I were the only ones in full support of the instatement. That only makes me curious as to what he was thinking. I see your point, Kakashi stated as he turned his head to the wood user. Yamato then nodded in acceptance. I guess we really can't disobey the Hokage's decree. Nope, Tsunade replied cheekily, changing her mood in an instant. And that is one reason why I love being Hokage. Yamato was slightly taken aback before he nodded his head again. Yes, Lady Hokage, then I will keep you updated with Naruto. Goodbye. He then did a shunshin, leaving Kakashi and Tsunade in the room alone. Once things died down, Kakashi looked at the Godame and turned his head to the door. Well, since you don't need me for anything, I might as well make my leave. Actually, Tsunade started, I do need your assistance. That made the silver-haired Jounin stop in his tracks. Oh, yes. I need you to keep an eye on Naruto and Konan for me, she replied, getting up from her chair, but wobbled just a bit after another faint spell washed over her. The coma's after effects were getting to her. So, you don't trust Konan after all? Kakashi replied in an aha tone. The slug summoner sighed in defeat. You're right. We can't fully trust her. Not just yet, anyway. She was an Akatsuki member and a person who killed innocent shinobi without thinking twice. But I do not want you doing anything that could interfere with Naruto's training. So just keep an eye on them and make sure nothing happens. Yes, Lady Tsunade, Kakashi replied lazily. And also, it was around 3 o'clock once Konan and Naruto reached the newly made training grounds. The heat was sweltering as it was the hottest time of the day, but that didn't really matter to the Leaf Village. People from Konoha were used to the heat and were still as adamant to continue building their village. Once Naruto showed her to the place he usually trains, she had to stop for a minute to take a breath, laying her weight on a new practice log by her arm. Just coming from the hospital the very same day and doing something like this was risky, but she felt like she had no choice. They would never get anything done in time if she didn't try to pack as much as needed into the lesson. Naruto looked at her anxiously for a few seconds before he grew impatient. Finally, after waiting a little longer, her spoke up. Well, what are we going to learn? Konan gazed at the boy before a frown took her face again. Patience is a virtue. That is what usually gets shinobi killed, is the recklessness that comes from eagerness. You should know that. Anyway, while you were standing there doing nothing, activate your Rinnegan. Naruto grumbled at the order he received from the blue-haired Jounin and reluctantly activated his Rinnegan in front of her, displaying 2 purple rings on each iris. That is when she pushed herself off of the log and walked over to Naruto, stopping about 10 feet away. Okay, Naruto-san, right now, I am your superior. I have listened, watched, and helped Nagato create in perfect jutsu and skills, so listen closely because I will only say this once, Konan stated, gaining the full attention of the only blonde there. Now that you have acquired the Rinnegan, there are certain abilities that have been added to your skill repertoire. It also means you have gained an upper hand in learning new jutsu, as they will somehow become easier for you to learn. Naruto listened intently as the young woman continued. I'm sure you are aware of the Bansho Tenin and the Shinra Tensei from your fight with Nagato's Devapath. Konan asked before she received an agreement from Naruto. Well, those 2 techniques come with the Kekkei Genkai, just like an example how the Manjikyu Sharingan comes with the ability of Amaterasu. Naruto did not know what that was and held his question about Amaterasu until later because he didn't want to interrupt the woman. Both moves are able to control the gravity that keeps us on the ground. Konan continues. To go more in depth, Bansho Tenin is the ability to pull any object towards you at your own free will by channeling your chakra through your hands. The chakra that is in your hands compresses until it creates its own gravity field in a small circumference inside your palm. The compression is so compact that it is generally invisible to the naked eye, which explains why you can't see it. This compression phase is also the reason why there is a 5-second window in both techniques. Anyway, wherever you point your hand while doing this attack, it will automatically be tugged to the source of the force. Depending on how much chakra you compress, the farther or heavier the object you can pull towards you. Oh, okay, Naruto replied with a sense of unusual understanding. Shinra Tensei, on the other hand, is similar to the Bansho Tenin, except it repels anything by gravity using the controlled chakra from your hands. To do this, you need to pressurize the gravity compression from Bansho Tenin to a degree to where it becomes unstable. That is when the gravity becomes unbalanced in your palm and it erupts into an explosion, causing a gravity expulsion away from your palm. She gave hand gestures to further explain the process. To do this move requires chakra control in the entire body, as it could prove fatal if your chakra explodes without synchronization. Your body has to be in sync for the impact of the expulsion to not affect it. Also, in order to do the full Shinra Tensei, you have to cast both arms outward and expel gravity from both hands simultaneously. If done correctly, it will create a barrier of disrupted gravity around your body, completely shielding you from any attack, just like what the Deva Path used. Konan let Naruto sink that information in for a second before she continued. She was surprised at his level of awareness, but quickly realized that his Rinnegan was activated, so she shrugged it off with indifference. Now, we shall give you a little practice, the Jounin replied, while picking up a random stick off of the ground. It was about a foot long, 1 centimeter in diameter, and weighed no more than an ounce or two. She then threw the stick about 30 feet away from Naruto, who watched in interest. Now, since you already have a jutsu that is similar to this technique in a way, it will make things a little easier. What I want you to do is hold out your hand, aim it at the stick, and concentrate. Imagine your chakra as if you were making a Rinnegan without making one, but keep compressing in your hand until you can't see it. Then, once you do that, concentrate on the stick and imagine it coming to you. What? Naruto asked in a shocked manner. How am I supposed to do that? It's hard enough to make a Rinnegan as it is. So how can I compress the chakra into nothing? Just think, Konan replied in a nonchalant tone. You have the Rinnegan, so it shouldn't be that hard. The Jinchuriki thought for a second before he realized what the woman was talking about. Then, with a simple sigh, he raised his right hand and began to concentrate on the stick. He thought about making the Rinnegan and compressed it until it became invisible in his mind. Once he did that, he concentrated hard on the stick, trying to imagine that it was coming to him. A few moments passed, and then a few minutes passed until Naruto realized nothing was happening. Konan-san, it's not working. Konan looked at him annoyed and spoke. It worked for Nagato, so I don't see why it shouldn't work for you. It was easy to him. He did it on his first try. Well, sorry for not being as good as my cousin, Naruto replied, heatedly still holding out his hand. You think it's just easy to grab something without using your hands? Fine, I will just concentrate on the stick right now, because it is just so easy. He then turned his eyesight to the stick and began sarcastically mimicking the pattern to grab it. That caused the blue-haired woman to shake her head. So I pretend to have a Rinnegan and then imagine the stick coming to me. Huh, like that dash. CHK. A soft pat on his palm interrupted his rant as his gaze faltered to his hand. To his amazement, the stick that he couldn't get just a second ago happened to be a tuck on his right hand like super glue. What the? How dash? See? Easy. Konan replied with a self-satisfying stare. But why couldn't I grab it just a second ago? The blonde asked in befuddlement. You weren't concentrating with your eyes, the Jounin replied with a sigh as the stick fell from Naruto's hand. You were concentrating with your mind. The Rinnegan is what makes the stick move, not your mind. Oh, well, why didn't you say that before? The boy asked, irritated because he looked like an idiot. Konan scoffed at him. I thought you already knew that. Either way, let's try it again so you get the idea of how the move works. Naruto grumbled more to himself as the paper user picked up the same stick and threw it 100 yards, making its way into the forest. Now, Konan began, you will use the same move you did previously, but at a farther distance away. Concentrate with your eyes and aim your hand to the direction I threw the stick. All right, the Jinchuriki replied as he began to concentrate on the piece of wood. His arm aimed at the stick, intently waiting on its arrival. His concentration made him lose his awareness as he only thought of bringing the stick into his grasp. It was as if it was just him and the wood he was trying to grab was there. After another moment, right before he was about to give up, a shuffle of leaves attracted his attention and something shot out of the woods as fast as a bullet. It came straight at Naruto, whose surprise was short-lived as the stick came to his hand and abruptly stopped, encountering resistance. Once again, it wasn't as hard as he thought it was. It's almost as if the Rinnegan tells him how much chakra to use, Konan thought quietly while she watched Naruto laugh in excitement. It was roughly 6 o'clock in the evening when Naruto and Konan decided to call it a day. She was training herself rather lightly in her jutsu, while simultaneously helping Naruto refine his stick-grabbing skills, and eventually moved it up to logs roughly 6 inches in diameter and 2 feet long. Konan was impressed while unimpressed at the same time. She knew the Rinnegan helped the user master any type of jutsu, but she didn't really think it was also easier to master the gravity moves. He seemed to get the idea pretty quickly, and it didn't even seem like he was tired. That move consumes a pretty good bit of chakra, and he's been doing it for the last 3 hours. But then she thought about the boy's chakra and ignored her amazement upon the fact. While walking away from the training grounds, Naruto heard a low growl from his stomach and laughed with a wry smile. Well, I'm hungry now. Haha, Konan-san, do you want to get something to eat? Konan glanced at him, a little interested in his request. I guess I am famished as well. I don't know anything about this place, so you should show the way. Naruto nodded with a slight smile. There's only one place I know where you won't be rejected from. That statement caused her to drop her head a bit. She just remembered that the village hates her. The only problem with this was the fact that she couldn't escape the situation. There was no way out, and it almost scared her. Strange. Why does that scare me? She asked herself in silence. She hasn't been scared of anything since she was a kid, and now the feelings roared its way to the surface, even if it was miniature in her state of mind. Don't worry about it, Konan-san, Naruto told her, which brought her head up in confusion. Did Naruto know what she was thinking? They're nice people, and I don't think they will judge you as quickly as you think they will. Konan widened her eyes about Naruto's reply. No, it wasn't what she was thinking, but it did make her feel a little happier once she realized there was still one person around who didn't loathe her. A slight smile overcame her face, knowing that, in a way, she still had a tie to Nagato. All right, Naruto-san. It had taken a few minutes to reach the building. It was none other than the famous Ichiraku ramen stand that Naruto had grown accustomed to going to on a daily basis. They had just opened up today, and Naruto was getting rather tired of cup ramen. Sure, he ate a little of the homemade foods that stacked in his home, but most of it couldn't fit in his refrigerator, so he had to throw the rest out. Once he pulled over the flap to let himself inside, a young woman greeted him with a cheerful voice. Oh, hey Naruto. It looks like you received our message today. Welcome to the new and improved Ichiraku. Naruto grinned at her response and looked around the store and noticed things completely redecorated. It carried the traditional counter seats that people ate from, but everything from the back looked as if it cost a lot of money. New fryers, stoves, and other hardware to cook were littered all over the back of the restaurant. It made Naruto a little happy for the Ichirakus. Thanks, I am Chan. Naruto beamed to the young brown-haired woman. I have someone with me today, so you can put their order on my tab. That's a first. I am replied cheekily, laying her arms on the counter. Who is it? Are you actually going on a date? Naruto blushed about that statement and rubbed the back of his neck. Nah, nothing like that. She's just a friend of mine, so it is a girl. Well, where is she? The young Ichiraku asked the blonde anxiously. I want to know who you brought with you. Okay, well, I will bring her in then, Naruto replied before motioning his hand, signaling the other person can enter. Naruto opened a flap for the blue-haired woman who entered with caution. Konan looked at the brown-haired woman who looked into her eye as well. It was sort of nerve-grueling because the paper user did not know whether or not to speak. She was unsure if what Naruto said was true about how the stand would not discriminate. Ayam gazed at her until finally, a happy smile overtook her features. Hello, welcome to Ichiraku Ramen. Konan stopped for a brief minute for surprise to subside before she returned the greeting and sat down on a stool. Thank you. I will be glad to eat here. Two other people in the stand noticed the paper user's presence and left with a rain check, going out with a look of contempt upon their faces when they looked in the paper user's direction. That didn't go unnoticed by her, nor the blonde Jinchuriki. Did I hear Naruto come in? An older voice called from the back to Ayam. An aged man walked into the front of the store, carrying a towel, wiping his hands thoroughly. His hair grayed with age and an apron wrapped on his body. It was none other than Tuchi Ichiraku. His face lit up in delight once he saw the young blonde sitting on a stool with a foxy grin. So, it is you. Been a while, hasn't it? Tuchi asked the Jinchuriki with warmth. It sure has, and you know what I want. Naruto replied with an enormous smile plastered on his face. Yeah, the usual. The older man replied with a similar smirk, until he noticed the other presence in the room. And who is this pretty young woman? You flatter me saying such things, but my name is Konan. The blue-haired Jounin replied with a slight smile at the end of her lips. Well, that's a lovely name, the older man replied with sweetness. And what will you be having? Konan didn't really know what to eat. She wasn't a big fan of ramen for personal reasons, but she couldn't decline Naruto's offer. Plus, on top of that, this was really the only place she could go to eat without having to worry about discrimination so far. Earlier, when they were walking to the ramen stand, they both passed a few restaurants with people inside who noticed the blue-haired woman walking by, and the managers of the restaurant passed evil glares toward her direction. They were stares of killer intent. They meant that she could not go there, and the owners were not willing to negotiate. Breaking from her ruminations, the Jounin looked up with concern before it disappeared in a flash. I would like today's special, please. Coming right up. You know the drill. Tucci replied with a smile. Yes, sir. Right away. The young Ichiraka replied before going to the back and preparing the food. Tucci looked at the two ninja before him and replied, Your food will be ready shortly. Thanks. I'm starved. Naruto replied before the older man returned to the back and helped his daughter. Things got quiet for a minute as no one talked or brought up anything. Naruto and Konan were sort of in their own little worlds, reflecting on the past and wondering about the future. It wasn't until Naruto decided to say something that made tension fall from the little stand. So, you are a wind nature too. That response seemed to stop Konan's reflecting, and she turned to eye him. How could you guess that? Well, Naruto started again. I saw you practicing your origami attacks while I was working on Bansho Tenin, and I noticed that all of your techniques have wind attributes. I never really knew that about you. Yes, while you did not see the full extent of my power because of my condition, I do indeed carry the futon affinity. Although, I am surprised you would bring up something like that. Konan replied calmly, averting her attention back to the counter. Naruto didn't really have to think twice about that statement. I brought it up because I have the futon nature too. You do? The blue-haired woman asked in a bit of shock. Naruto looked at her a little puzzled and lowered his voice to a whisper. You didn't know? I thought all Akatsuki knew about their enemy. While that may be true, Konan replied, shifting her eyes back to the counter. Information came rather slowly in our organization. I think the only time we actually found out about your affinity was when you fought Nagato's Deva Path. Hith. I guess that's why I still overpowered Nagato. Naruto replied with a foxy grin. Possibly, but I do have one question the paper user brought up. Where does the Raisin Shuriken work? I heard Nagato commenting about it while you were fighting his Deva Path. He said something about it involving wind, and it seemed to annoy him, so it must have been a rather powerful jutsu. Well, it is a jutsu I worked on while I was in Mtima, and Naruto began while gaining the interest of the woman to his right. Basically, I create a Rinnegan with another clone helping me mold the chakra. Then afterwards, I begin using my wind nature to encase the Rinnegan with wind chakra. Once I do that, I push more wind chakra into the move until the wind blades start increasing in size and rotation. Then once it's ready, I just throw it and watch the fireworks. That sounds complicated and difficult. Konan replied with an odd look of awe. Naruto smiled at her again. Yeah, I trained a very long time to do that, but the move is still not perfected though. What do you mean, not perfected? That seems like a move all to its own. How can something that's strong not be completed? Konan replied with a look of irritation. Well, the blonde spoke after a few seconds of thinking. Before I left the hospital for my checkup after my fight with Nagato, they did a scan on me and told me that every time I do that move, it affects my cells to a point where I lose a day of my life every time I use it. It's sort of an issue with that technique. Konan sunk her head a little low after hearing that. It seemed the lifespan problem was universal to every shinobi. It only made her think of her friend even more than she wanted to. I believe you can do it, the blue-haired woman replied hoarsely. Huh? Naruto replied. He could barely make out what she said. I really think you can achieve that feat, Konan replied louder with confidence. You have such a huge advantage already by bearing the Rinnegan. If anything, I want to help you with your attack if I can. Naruto thought about it for a second. Another moment passed by before a grin crept across his face. Sure, I'd like that. And who knows, maybe I will teach you how to use it. It was really confusing to Konan now. Naruto seemed to really trust her for him to explain how to do a move like that, and even offered to teach it to her no less. But to have someone put full trust in her in only 6 days after their original encounter was a little strange. It was almost like a role reversal with someone she once knew. Naruto turned to look at who was talking and saw a silver-haired, mask-bearing Jounin behind him. "Kakashi-sensei? What are you doing here?" "What? Can I just drop by to say hey to a student of mine?" Kakashi replied, innocently looking at the blonde. Naruto glared unsatisfied at the Jounin. "But you already met me today, so this time has to be something else." Kakashi looked over to the Jinchuriki and wandered his eye over to Konan, who was looking back at him with interest on her face. They seemed to be doing fine. Nothing unusual. "So this is the new recruit? I'm assuming you already know my name, and I already know yours. So no reason for introductions, is there?" He replied with a masked smile. "I guess not, but would prefer if we reintroduced ourselves, now that we are on the same footing," the blue-haired woman replied with nonchalance. Kakashi changed his look of happened into interest as he saw Konan reach her hand out in a greeting gesture. "Hello, my name is Konan, and I am a Leaf Jounin. What is yours?" The silver-haired man looked at her hand for a second before he let out a smile and grabbed her hand with a friendly handshake. "My name is Kakashi." "Nice to meet you, Konan of the Leaf. I think we will get along just fine. Just as long as you don't get any funny ideas." "So Kakashi-sensei, why are you here?" Naruto asked, clearly annoyed by the man's disregard of the blonde's question earlier. "Huh?" Kakashi replied in confusion. "I thought I already told you. I like to visit my stew dash. That's a load of crap, and you know it." Naruto screamed with self-righteousness. Kakashi thought for a second, shifting his body position from one leg to the other, then let out an eye smile. "It's the truth. If I came here for anything important, you would be the first to know." "Well," Naruto replied in defeat, "all right. It was nice to see you too, I guess. That wasn't so hard, was it?" Kakashi replied with a smile in his eye. "Now, I have things to attend to, so I will have to talk to you later." He then looked over to the blue-haired woman and gave her an eye smile as well. "Later, Konan of the Leaf." And with that, he started walking away from the two, lifting the flap over his head. He abruptly stopped after the flap left his silver hair and poked his head back in between the flaps. "Oh, by the way, both of you are to live together in Naruto's flat." Tsunade's orders. Kakashi then did a shunshin, leaving the couple alone in the restaurant. There was an absolute silence that encased the whole stand, leaving nothing to make a sound. "All right, guys, Naruto's usual and today's special." "I am," replied, placing their orders on the counter with a smile. The brown-haired girl opened her eyes shortly after and looked at both of the Satacho-esque figures standing in the lone stand. Hello." It was morning time for the Jinchuriki and the paper user. Dew began to slowly evaporate from the leaves, and the birds chirped their songs in the wind that started the new day. The two ninja didn't really have the best night the night before because of some unusual living arrangements that had to be enforced. As it turned out, Konan had to legate with Naruto in his flat, and that caused a lot of awkwardness to ensue. Konan didn't really mind the living arrangements because she would rather have a bed to sleep in than a cot in a tent like other ninja had to suffice with. Naruto, on the other hand, was in rejection to the arrangements and even ran down to the new halfway-built Hokage Tower and complained to the Godame about it. Tsunade brought up a lot of many great reasons as to why this would be the best choice. Luckily, Naruto's flat was one of the first things the village built again, because if it wasn't, then they both would have had to share a tent together. The village was also enraged of her stay, so she couldn't live on her own. There would be many assassination attempts. Also, they would be training together because of Naruto's Rinnegan, so they would need to spend as much time together as possible, just in case something unusual happened. Their added time to each other also means they can learn from each other and build good teamwork with one another because they will need it. Plus, Konan felt obligated to stay around the Jinchuriki anyway. Naruto mildly complained, but realized that everything Tsunade said was true. Konan didn't complain one bit. Her heart actually felt a bit calmer upon that information. It seemed the Sannin trust Konan to be around Naruto, even so far as to live with him. Wasn't Tsunade worried that something would happen? Konan wouldn't have felt entirely comfortable staying in constant sight of the Jinchuriki if they were to share a tent, Although, not to say that she wouldn't have minded that either. If she had no choice, then it was perfectly fine. It wasn't her first time having to get used to new living arrangements. It was a random thought that crossed her mind, but she still didn't like the idea of not having a room. She had won an Amage cure before battles broke loose in the city, but her place in aim didn't matter anymore because her life was currently in the Leaf Village protecting the next prophetic child. Of course, she remembered herself being the Amage cure Kage and fulfilling the responsibility of keeping the village safe. She actually thought about it a lot more than before, but her mind was made up about several things. The village is in no near danger anytime soon because there is nothing of importance there for the Akatsuki to invade. Another thing that never left her mind was the fact that she was basically kept in Konoha against her will. Yes, she could hold her own against a few powerful shinobi, but the village would only overpower her in the end and win. She also thought about the undeniable will that was passed down to Naruto whenever Nagato saw him eye to eye. That will called for true peace. She almost forgot about her conditional yet unconditional protection to Naruto's well-being. Conditional meaning she would get killed if she didn't follow up in Naruto's training, and unconditional meaning that she wanted to protect Naruto for his passed-down will and claiming him to be the true child of prophecy. Mainly, the last part about protecting the boy was her reason for staying. They found themselves beginning to practice in the training grounds. It was no later than 8 in the morning, and both ninja realized they needed to remain focused. So they started with practicing on his techniques again. Konan laid herself on the wooden log just like the day before to catch her breath, but didn't have to stay as long. Her recovery was going along rather well, and it seemed as if she would be seemingly normal in the next couple of days. Naruto did some early stretches to prepare himself. He was utterly psyched upon learning more about these two techniques. After another breath, Konan got up a guy and looked at the eager blonde. "All right, are you ready?" "Oh man, are you kidding me?" Naruto blurted out with excitement stirring in his voice. "I've been waiting since yesterday." She let out a smile that was barely noticeable, but returned with her voice. "Okay, so you know the basic idea as to how to use the Bansho Tenin. Now it's time to teach you how to use the Shinra Tensei." Naruto got into his thinking pose and activated his Rinnegan for the lesson. "But before I do that, there are some things I have to tell you about the Rinnegan before we start." She closed her eyes and heaved a sigh. "The reason I tell you to activate your Rinnegan is so you can everything I tell you. No, it is not like the Sharingan where you can copy countless jutsu, but it does give you better memory altogether. Do you remember everything that happened yesterday while your Rinnegan was activated?" Naruto looked at her for a second and began to think. I don't know. All right. Well, then I will help you remember with a simple question." She spoke with slight annoyance, but with simplicity. "How many times did you use the Bansho Tenin?" "That's easy," Naruto scoffed. 258 times. "Wait a minute. I always lose count when I practice, so I shouldn't have known that." "That's exactly what I was trying to tell you. Rinnegan gives you a better memory of everything that happens," the blue-haired woman replied with nonchalance. "It also gives you a clearer mind to where you can think rationally in even the most intense of situations." "Wow, that's amazing," the blonde said with awe. "I see why Nagato was so strong now." "Yes, but that does not cure the irrationality that you obtain through anger and rage. If you do not forget that, then you'll be fine." Naruto thought about her words for a minute. Anger tended to be a very difficult thing to ignore, since there were times where he couldn't really control himself. "All right. I will try." "Good. Since you now know this, I can teach you Shinra Tensei," she replied without much hesitation. Shinra Tensei is a little harder to maneuver for several different reasons. But since I told you why yesterday, we can just start the lesson now. Naruto nodded his head in agreement. "Okay. You remember how I told you to compress the chakra in your hand until it becomes invisible?" The blonde shook his head again. "Well, this time you compress the chakra in your hand to where it becomes unstable. I am pretty sure this part will be a little easier to achieve since you have technically mastered the Bansho Tenin." Konan replied dully. "Just so that same exact thing you did before, except make it to where you synchronize your chakra throughout your whole body while simultaneously unbalancing your chakra in your hand." The Jinchuriki's face fell off from Konan's explanation. "You make it seem like it is so easy." The Jounin looked at him unimpressed. You said the same thing about Bansho Tenin, and yet you have basically completed that move in one day. This one should be no different. His expression changed from one of concern to one of happiness. Then, without saying a word, he began to try it out, closing his eyes to concentrate. He lifted his hand and put full focus into the move, opening his eyes again only seconds later brimmed with confidence. A faint whisper in the winds alerted something was happening before an explosion erupted out of Naruto's palm, blowing him backwards into a tree. He hit it with much force, causing leaves to shake loose and fall to the ground. Once the momentum ceased, his body slumped over and he did not say a word. "Naruto-san, are you all right?" Konan asked as she walked over to him. Slight concern etched across her face from Naruto's little stunt while she kneeled down next to the boy. The Jinchuriki brought his face up to match her eye level and began rubbing the back of his head with his hand while laughing sheepishly. Guess I used too much chakra." A sigh escaped her lips from the immediate laugh he gave her. "No, that's not at all. Your body was not in exact sync with your chakra, and it caused you to fly backwards." "Look," she replied while lending a hand and helping him up. "The reason why I tell you to be in sync is because your body has to withstand the force the expulsion brings, and that means you have to endure the gravitational force it releases." "Oh," the orange-clad ninja answered as if he just figured it out. "So just match my chakra level throughout my entire body while doing the technique, and I should be able to stay in one place if I do this." "Precisely." All right then," he replied with a determined grin. "This time, I know I can do it." The blonde then closed his eyes one last time to concentrate and sync his chakra. He opened them shortly after and held out his right hand again, just like he did previously. Once he did that, another whisper in the wind pierced through the air. A mere second later, a strong burst expelled from his hand, causing dirt, leaves, and a few sticks to fly away opposite of his position. A hand clap session was heard from Naruto's left once he finished. It made him feel really proud to know that he somehow succeeded in satisfying his teacher and succeeded in basically mastering the move. He turned his head to give her his trademark grin, but light heaves from her direction caused him to stop. He looked over to her and saw her face contorted with anguish in a feeble effort to stop the sudden rush of emotion. She pulled her hands up to her face and began wiping the tears that were continuously falling down her soft cheeks. Her sobs grew more and more uncontrolled as her heaving became irregular. She was clearly distressed, but the question was, what was it about? Naruto, though, about it for a minute. It was really bothering him to see her look that way. She was in agony, and her really didn't know why. "Konan-chan, are you okay?" Naruto asked as he walked over to her. She still sobbed even louder than before, completely ignoring the blonde's question, which left Naruto to stop in his tracks. He halted his hand from reaching over to her and dropped it to his side. It seemed like this was one of those times where Naruto didn't know what to do. Thinking it was the best choice in the matter, Naruto just turned around and started walking away. He thought that there are just some times when people needed to be alone. His steps faded as she continued, lightly sobbing. She went over to a tree and slid her back against the bark all the way to the ground. Her conscience was spinning in all directions, making her feel like she was going insane. It all came crashing down again, consuming her. Page break. Naruto paced himself through the streets of Konoha. His mind was somewhere else because he really wasn't watching where he was going. He bumped into a couple of people who, in return, gave angry shouts until they recognized who he was. Once they did, it went from meanness to niceness at the drop of a hat. They began shouting apologies and begging forgiveness for their rude behavior. The blonde merely shrugged it off and told them it was no big deal and walked away. He was too lost in thought to really care what others had to say. He was more concerned about Konan. He's been unusually broody ever since he came home from defeating Nagato. What is wrong with her? She just all of a sudden started crying. The blonde replied to no one as he sat down on a bench. Is it because of him? He started pounding his fist on the bench, forcefully creating cracks on its surface. I don't understand. Naruto, the Jinchuriki, looked up upon hearing his name and noticed a figure standing beside him. She carried her usual attire of red with her hitate going around her head, pulling her pink hair up. Oh, hey, Sakura-chan. Hey, I was wondering where you were. The pink-haired girl replied with a smile while taking a seat beside him. What are you doing here? Naruto asked, putting his gaze to the ground. I am just helping rebuild Konoha on the West End, and I decided to take a break. What about you? Aren't you usually training or something? It's kind of early for you to be sitting out here. Yeah, I guess you're right, Sakura-chan. The orange-clad boy replied with a smile. Sakura then noticed something strange about her friend. He had that look on his face again. That same look he had when she helped him with Konan. That same look when he couldn't get Sasuke back. A look of guilt. It didn't only appear on his face, but it appeared in his eyes as well when he looked at her. Are you all right, Naruto? The pink-haired girl asked her longtime friend. He only stared at her for a second, then sunk his head a little lower than normal. He knew that Sakura could see through anything that he tried to attempt, so he answered truthfully, no, not really. Is it about Sasuke? The girl asked him quietly, who only shook his head in disagreement. No, it's about Konan-chan. Naruto responded with a depressed demeanor. Chan. Sakura, though perplexed, but knowing that Naruto was troubled at the moment, she let that slide and kept it for later. She's not doing anything to you, is she? Is she trying to change you? Just tell me, and I'll dash. No, Sakura-chan, it's nothing like that. Well, what is it? Naruto thought about it for a minute. He had to put the right words into what he was about to say. So he looked around the area for a moment, then heaved a sigh and looked into the sky. Well, she was training me today. Right now, I am learning how to use the Rinnegan and the moves that come with it. Rinnegan, she shouted to Naruto, wide-eyed. She never knew that Naruto had the Rinnegan. Actually, she hasn't talked to Naruto since they healed Konan. He didn't really talk then either, so nothing was ever really said between the two of them. As of late, she had been too busy helping the village restoration to actually give him time of day. That is not to say that she didn't want to see him. When she had breaks, he was never around his usual places where she normally found him, so it couldn't be helped. Yeah, I have a Rinnegan. Nagato gave it to me. Nagato? Who's Nagato? Sakura asked, confused. She really wasn't in the loop of things that happened in the last week because of confidential reasons, but it sounded like she was about to get her fill. You know him as Pain, the guy who destroyed the village. The kunoichi gasped at his answer. Pain was some guy named Nagato, and he willingly gave Naruto the Rinnegan? That seemed a little too far-fetched in her opinion. There's no way that he could give Naruto that type of responsibility. But then again, Nagato did revive everyone that died after what Naruto said to the man that made him second-guess his reason. Okay, well, why are you depressed because of Konan? The girl asked him, a little curious. She figured now was not the best time to discuss of this Akatsuki business out in the open, since people were still trying to adjust. She didn't really trust the blue-haired jounin either. So she had to get the scoop of what was troubling the young Uzumaki. Naruto sighed softly, but quickly answered, we were practicing today, just like the day before. Nothing was wrong, really. Actually, everything was going great. He then grew a moderate grin on his face at the recollection. I learned how to do both of the gravity moves that Nagato knew how to do basically in 2 days, and that is without having to use clones for added training time. Sakura's eyes widened a bit after hearing that. Naruto learned those moves that destroyed the village, moves that require months of training for? There's just no way. This really stumped the pink-haired girl in many ways. First off, Naruto was Naruto. It was not possible for him to learn an entire jutsu in a day, especially since they were very powerful and consumed a lot of chakra. As a matter of fact, it was literally impossible to learn a jutsu in a day. Second, he never even used his Kage Bunshin to help him cut down the training time, which made no sense at all. Did the Rinnegan have something to do with that? She was quickly thrown out of her ruminations as she heard the blonde continue. Just as soon as I finally completed the Shinra Tensei, she started crying. Naruto hesitated as he finished his last statement. It was really bothering him to a degree where it was the only thing on his mind, which was strange. I called her name, but she didn't say anything. Then, I sort of left because I thought that she just wanted to be alone. He then looked at her with pleading eyes. Sakura-chan, I don't know what to do. Why is she crying? The red-dressed girl closed her eyes and pondered the situation. She didn't really know the whole ordeal, so she was a little short on words. Hearing that Konan, an ex-Akatsuki, was crying, she felt like that sort of thing was impossible. But then again, she is human after all. For some reason, though, hearing that Naruto left the blue-haired woman alone really upset her. Actually, that was the first thing that came to her mind when he said that. Why did you leave her? Sakura asked in an annoyed tone. Huh? I thought SH dash. Let me ask you a question, Naruto. Did you want to be alone whenever you cried? Hey, wait a dash. The blonde boy was taken aback by what she asked. He tried to rebuttal the question only to be cut off by Sakura again. Even if she was the enemy, she is still just a person like you and me, no matter how hard I don't want to accept it. Naruto tried to say something in Sakura's rant, but she overpowered his voice, leaving him with nothing but a squeak. Naruto, she is obviously in a state of anguish. She's been forced to live in Konoha against her will, and I don't think that is something to easily get over. Even though you did save her life, it's not like she asked you to save her. The girl sat her back to the backrest and heaved a sigh. Honestly, I don't know exactly what's going on in her head, but I do know that if I was in a situation like she was in then, I would be the same way. That little outburst really left him speechless. Sakura was right. Naruto didn't have to save her, but he did anyway. Not only that, now Konan was forced to live in Konoha. That's right, she can't leave. Ack, damn it. I totally forgot she was forced to stay here. Why didn't I plan this better? I'm such an idiot. He began to pound his fist on his leg in a fervent attempt to recognize his problem. Of course, Konan would be upset about being forced somewhere she doesn't want to live. He was left feeling a little numb. He had to make it up to her somehow, but the question was, how was he going to do that? There was nothing that he could do to make her forgive his short-sighted decisions. Honestly, Naruto, Sakura began with her usual bashing on the blonde. I thought you would have grown up by now, but I guess you never really did learn anything, huh? Naruto looked down in his lap once she said that. It was the usual when it came to Sakura. He would always do something wrong and end up hearing his faults and what he did wrong. She was more like a mother scolding her child every time he did something. Yeah, I guess you're right. Huh? The pink-haired girl wasn't really expecting that one. He usually tried to back himself up with his answers and usually says something that is irrelevant. It was as if it was actually getting to him. Yeah, you're right, Sakura-chan. I just don't know what to do. Sakura began brooding about it by placing her hand on her chin. The only thing you can do now is apologize to her, although I doubt that we'll do anything being as how it wouldn't really matter. Naruto sighed and slumped over even more at her declaration. She was really cutting him down. The girl noticed his state, and it made her hesitant to say any more. She really wasn't helping him at all, and it took her a few seconds to realize it. He probably already knew that he couldn't change anything, and she was only adding to the fire. She grinned slightly to try and turn things around. Hey, it's not like you to be so down. Lighten up, she replied while giving him a slap on the back. I'm sure you'll figure it out, Naruto. You tend to figure everything else out on your own. So what makes now any different? You're not going to let something this small affect you, are you? He looked at her from the sudden back slap. She showed solid support for the blonde boy, and it made him realize one of the reasons why he liked her. Yeah, I guess not. That's great to hear, Sakura stated happily. Now, are you going to be depressed all day, or are you going to try and fix the problem? His smile widened before it turned into his trademark foxy grin. I'll fix it. Great. Who knows, Naruto? Maybe she could end up falling for you, and you both could end up in a kinky relationship, she replied with a mischievous grin. Naruto blanched after that, but did a 180 and blushed afterwards. Ah, Sakura-chan, don't say something like that. He then slumped over in embarrassment, causing the pink-haired girl to laugh. Sorry. She giggled while waving her hand dismissively and looked at Naruto. However, that gaze slowly changed into a confused look on her face. She didn't know what it was, but something else was different about her Jinchuriki friend. Naruto noticed her odd looks and brought them to question. What? What is it? Sakura, startled from her eyeing the boy, quickly asked, unsure. Did you do something to your hair? The blonde simply stared at her with a similar puzzled expression before answering. No, it's the same as it always has been. Why do you ask? She looked one more time before sighing and producing a smile. It's nothing. Anyway, I guess I'm going to go. The village doesn't build itself, you know. All right, Sakura-chan, Naruto replied with perplexity. They then bid each other farewell as the pink-haired girl left. After she was gone, his face went blank as he was faced with the challenge of apologizing to his new teammate. It was another day for me. The second day of my permanent stay in Konoha. This was so confusing. Of all of the people I could have ended up being around, what was I thinking for allowing my guard to fall so low? This village despises my very existence, and yet I am living in it. I knew this would happen if I ever let it get this far. That's why I didn't join Naruto in his original offer in the first place. But somehow I am here. It was almost as if fate was actually playing with us all like puppets on strings. Was there a purpose? I got up and started a slow pace through the forest, not really thinking where I was going. I just wanted to be alone. Just being around Konoha sent shivers down my spine. The tears kept coming and coming, but it was hopeless to even try to stop them. Every attempt to seize and desist these forsaken tears only let them flow even more. I'm crying, but I don't even know why. Konoha, just thinking about this place makes me dizzy. It's like I am their property. What was my reason for staying? Why did I bother to even train that simple-minded boy? He's so naive with his ideals. What makes him think that he can save the world? It made me angrier the more I thought about it. Why did I trust in him? How can Nagato put so much trust in this boy, who can't even do a fraction of what he could do? Everything about him is just so annoying. Even last night, when he treated me to ramen, he didn't even bother to use manners. What was he for years old? Even Jiraiya-sensei had proper etiquette while he ate, while not much for anything else. He just gets under my skin. Clearly Nagato was not in his right state of mind when he thought this would work, placing that chakra rod fragment in a Naruto like that. Whatever his thoughts were, I highly doubt they were rational. I continued walking through the forest, replaying my thoughts over and over again. It was a cacophony of noise that wouldn't go away. Why stay here and help him? He is the enemy. Why do you trust him? Why did Nagato end his life for this boy's benefit? I don't know why. Everything about this seems wrong. Is Naruto really the child of prophecy? Even I couldn't figure out exactly what makes Naruto a little different from the rest. He's so childish. And that smile, that was when I stopped my train of thought. His smile was different. That warmness it created. It seemed like his smile could brighten the whole entire village and leave a glow for days. For some reason, every time I am around him, it is as though I don't have as much to worry about. Can I honestly feel that way about someone who seems to know nothing? He's young. In first person, Konan turned her head and saw a silver-haired, mask-bearing Jounin walking right behind her. His expression was neutral, but you could feel a knowing vibe radiating off of him. Is there something I can help you with, Kakashi? Not really, Kakashi replied firmly. I am just watching you to make sure you don't do anything rash. She smiled, sadly followed by a light scoff. TC, it's not like I could leave if I wanted to. I will be dead before I even get halfway out of this place. True, he replied with acceptance, but I doubt Naruto would allow that to happen. What do you mean? That gained her interest rather quickly, right? Believe it or not, he already sees you as a comrade. He doesn't let his friends die so easily. The silver-haired man responded while gazing into the sky. Her eyes widened slightly for what she just heard. Comrade? Yes, in his eyes. You are already his friend. Kakashi came back as if answering her unvoiced question. And although I don't totally agree with your residence, it's not really my decision either. Konan didn't have any retort to that statement. It only left her to ponder more on the reasons she survived that fight with Madara. If Naruto wasn't there to come in and save her the way he did, she would have died and hit the final nail in the Akatsuki trio's coffin. Naruto was there almost as if he already knew, but she knew her friend Nagato had something to do with that. He came just in time to save her and basically gave her a second chance. Her eyes widened slightly once she thought about something. It was something that she didn't think about earlier and would keep the new question for later. Naruto is a strange character. Kakashi, the blue-haired woman, replied bluntly while staring at the ground. The man's sweat dropped at her statement while closing his eye and rubbed the back of his head. Yeah, he gets that a lot. But the male Jounin continued while opening his eye again. It's just the way he is. Everything he does influences everybody. He has a strange way of getting into everyone's heart. Konan couldn't help but feel a little truth coming from that statement. She thought about how Nagato changed after hearing Naruto's explanations in the hollowed paper tree. I can see that from the way the villagers view him. It's almost as if everyone depends on him. Well, you can say that, Kakashi replied in a slightly resigned voice. He's like a beacon of hope that gives everyone confidence, not only in themselves, but with the entire village as well. Maybe that's what keeps me around him, she thought while looking around into the trees. I did say that he gave everyone hope. Did I think I was an exception? Her thoughts went back to her fight with Toby/Madara again during the time she spoke so confidently about Naruto's light. I know. He gave me hope as well. The blue-haired Leaf-Neen replied solemnly while looking over her shoulder. She started taking a few more steps toward the Leaf Village while wiping her eyes. And don't worry about me. I'm not going anywhere anytime soon. Not because I have no choice, but because I have a duty to fulfill. He is the child of prophecy after all. She then paced alone back into the village, leaving Kakashi to himself. Once he was alone, he started quietly thinking. The village isn't the only thing that Naruto seems to be getting to. After that was said, a slight smile crossed his face. Maybe she isn't all bad. Space break. Equals. Whispers came from all directions as a woman walked through the village and rubble. Things were sort of a mixed match of buildings and debris as people were busily working trying to fix their old lives that they cherished. It didn't take long before people realized who was walking beside them, and they immediately dispersed trying to get away from her. Most people who already knew who she was just ignored the woman and pretended like she wasn't there, as if she were a part of the background that held no significance. She didn't care though. Obviously, she wanted to tell them off, but try to talk to people who were living in their own world was kind of hard to achieve. You can't tell anyone something if they were too blind to take things into consideration. What was the point? They would only ignore her or talk over her, which was something common to people who wouldn't understand what she had to go through. She was currently brooding at the moment, which was something that was becoming a habit for her. She wasn't just in thought, because now she fell back into her anger phase again. It seemed as though what Kakashi said didn't really stick with her very long, because she was already thinking that Naruto knew nothing of her. She layered herself with more denial at the boy and what he can achieve, although earlier she said herself that she believed that Naruto is the prophetic child and that he gave everyone hope. Her random mood swings were getting more severe the longer she stayed around here. While the woman was in her thoughts, an ANBU member poofed randomly in front of her. It didn't scare her, although it did make her flinch because she was deep in thought beforehand. The ANBU stood only for a second before he ordered, "Follow me." Knowing she wouldn't be able to decline, she nodded her head silently and let him lead the way. After following the ANBU for several minutes, they came across another end of the village. It had a lot less people in it who were busily building houses and frames for support. People were painting, lining electricity, creating plumbing systems, fixing roofs, and whatever other mundane tasks that were required to build housing. You could also see a small group of children playing off to themselves across the street from where the buildings were being built. 2 were girls while the other 2 were boys, and each child looked no older than 5 years old. The sight of the children playing and enjoying themselves almost brought a smile to her face. Almost. All right, the cloaked figure replied to the blue-haired woman, snapping her attention away from the children. Your task is to help these people in whatever they require your assistance for. You will continue working until they stop working. The EMBU was replying in an authoritative tone, signifying it wasn't a request, but a command. She only nodded her head again and looked unamused at her surroundings until a voice broke through the air. So, is this our help that was sent to us by the Hokage? An older man, roughly in his 50s or 60s with small rectangular glasses whose hair was graying on his head and goatee from age, came up while grasping a hammer in his hand and laying it on his shoulder. Yes, Tizune-san, this Kunoichi will be aiding you with your work for today. Good, good. The elder man replied while rubbing his chin. She will do just fine. All I needed was one person, and it looks like I can now settle my worry. The ANBU looked at the new Jounin once more before he disappeared by Shunshin, leaving Konan with the elder man. He gave her a once-over and smiled before he wiped his forehead with his arm. Well, grab some tools and let's get down to it, shall we? She only nodded her head with an emotionless mask across her face, took the tools that were lying around, and began doing whatever Tizuna asked of her. Space break. It was around 3 o'clock, the hottest part of the day. Konan had been helping basically all day and was seeing the effect on herself. She was sweating profusely and always asking for water more often than necessary, but she never did complain or bother about anything else other than being dehydrated. It was more or less like she was on autopilot and just doing the labor like a machine, numb to life and her surroundings, and only did what she was told. Sometimes she would also mumble something to herself, but it was always too low to make out whenever she did say something, so it was ignored. Tazuna began to watch the woman as she slowly descended into an even more robotic state, if that were possible, and began to question it. He may be old, but he knew that something was troubling the young woman and keeping her from giving her all to the project. She was a leaf ninja. She should be more willing than even the foreign builders around here. She began to raise another structure beam for the second story of a house, making sure it was perfectly straight and at the location it was needed. When she went to grab nails and the hammer to put it in place, the beam began to lose balance and started tilting in the direction of other beams that were currently unattached because other workers were busy with those beams about to nail their own. "Hey, you shouldn't leave the beam unattended. It might hurt somebody," a grisly voice said to Konan as she looked over and saw the same gray-haired man she met earlier, holding the beam with his two hands with a smile. Her eyes widened a little, but she regained her mask, not wanting to really talk to the man. "Sorry," she replied with blank eyes while taking the wood from his hand and placing it back where it was before. The man looked at her for a moment, but started working beside the woman, trying to keep a steady pace with himself. After watching her continue with her mechanical behavior, he decided that now was the time to speak up. "Look, I know it's not really my business, but I'm just curious to know if you are all right." "Yes," she replied blankly and hastily to him, not really veering her eyesight from the work she was doing. Tazuna sighed at her quick remark. "Look, I've seen a lot of people do the same thing, so I know when you say you're fine, you're not really fine." "You are right." The blue-haired woman responded to him calmly, still busily working on another support board. Tazuna widened his eyes at the sudden agreement she replied to him. "So, there really was dash. You were right about it not being your business," she retorted to him, making his face turn slightly sour. After his face turned sour, though, he changed it to acknowledgement as he thought to himself. "It seems as though she doesn't want to talk about it. Maybe I can get." He began to raise another beam as he started talking. "You know, I had a friend know a son who died as a hero amongst our village." Konan continued working as if she wasn't listening. So Tazuna continued. "But a thug took control of our village and made it seem like my son was a criminal for doing heroic deeds. That evil man took my son and executed him in the town square." He paused slightly at the memory and closed his eyes while a sigh escaped his lips. Of course, it left the whole town in shock, not only for the execution, but for the fact that he was a hero amongst them that fell at the hands of this evil man. Needless to say, the whole town lost hope, and I fell into a depression along with my daughter and grandson. We all lost hope. Konan stopped, but for only a second once she realized that she was listening and continued what she was doing. "The entire town and I decided that we needed a bridge so we could get supplies a lot faster and have a booming economy. After our hero fell out, our village took a turn for the worst, and we lost all trades coming into the village. It was mainly due to the evil man that controlled our land." He then shifted his eyesight to the beam and began hammering. "While we were working on the bridge, however, the evil man began killing off the bridge builders and endangering all of the rest that were alive because he felt this bridge was a threat to his services, which it was." He picked up another nail and began hammering it into the beam. "We were in a bind and not really knowing what else to do, so we decided to hire a group of leaf ninja to protect us until we finished the bridge. But morale was falling between the bridge builders, so most of them quit. Since I was the leader of the bridge builders, I had a duty to my village and my family to build that bridge." He lowered his eyes, "So I never gave up, and I tried my hardest to finish as fast as I could. It wasn't until a scuffle with a missing mist ninja that I thought it was the end of me. He was hired by the evil man to kill me and the rest of the bridge builders so that we couldn't finish." Tazuna began pounding with the hammer again, trying to keep his body occupied and to relinquish some of that mental stress. "While the ninja I paid for assisted me, I met the mist ninja for the first time. He was a very cruel man when I met him. He was out to get me, and I knew it when I saw him. The ninja I hired protected me and defeated the man." The blue-haired woman stopped hammering and continued listening. She was actually listening to his story, although she also figured that it wouldn't help to try and stop him. Not only that, but she didn't want for him to stop, which was odd to her. noticing discreetly that she was actually paying attention to him. He played a smirk on his face and continued. I was escorted to my home and began building on the bridge. The ninja watched over me and the other builders while we worked, but he stopped a second for added effect. That same mist ninja came back and tried to attack again. Those ninja fought their best to defeat him and his teammate that helped him. Unknowing to us, the evil drug lord decided to ambush us all during the fight and thought he could outnumber us to win. Tazuna picked up a beam and put it in place. That mist ninja then realized that he no longer had to kill me and went after the thug and mini army he created and ended the evil man's life. He turned and gave her a grin, causing her to immediately turn her head and continue her building as if she was never paying attention to him in the first place. Needless to say, we were able to finish the bridge and gain a prospering village again. That statement caused the man to heartily laugh out loud. Others looked at him with a grin, probably workers from the village he came from, but only for a moment before continuing on their tasks. I was so grateful to the ninja that helped me that I even named the bridge after one of them. His laugh then died down, and he put on a confident look. The one I named it after was the one that gave me and my family the courage and hope to move on, continue with our lives, and never give up. When I first met him, I thought he was just another brat who didn't give a damn about anything but himself. But once I realized that he never gave up on his word and was even the one that wanted to ensure my safety the most, I changed my mind about him. A thankful smile appeared while he said the next few words. He looked over to Konan, who had forgotten that she was even looking at him, and said, "He gained my respect." The boy was very strong and selfless, something that the entire village of mine needed for a while. In our village's eyes, he is pronounced a hero. His name is Naruto Uzumaki. The blue-haired woman replied, barely over a whisper. Tazuna gave her a surprised look as it quickly turned into a smile. Oh, so you know him? Conan's eyes widened slightly at the man's sudden answer. Naruto was Dash. A round of laughter from a group of children kept her from finishing her thoughts. After hearing the children, Tazuna noticed them and walked over to the edge of the building from the second floor to see the little kids from earlier. They were playing around and on top of a building that was still in shambles, right next door to the building they were fixing. The one next door looked close to collapsing on itself, and they were playing like it was no big deal. With a great shout and a hand to his mouth to enhance the sound, the man yelled to them, "Hello, young children, I'm sorry, but you can't play in the buildings. Please move into the street. That house is dangerous." Konan couldn't hear the children too well, but she could make out something that sounded like a "yes, sir," and a shuffling of feet. Tazuna walked back over to Konan and gave her a smile. "Sorry about that. So as I was saying, you really dash." Bam! Boom! Boam! A giant sound erupted from the building next door as it began to crumble and fall to the ground. All 3 stories of it. The workers all huddled to the edges of the second story to get a good glimpse at what happened, even though they missed most of it and just saw the ending where smoke plumed into the air. Tazuna looked at it for a moment and breathed a sigh of relief before walking back over to the blue-haired woman's direction. Well, at least the children got out of it before Dash. Yeah, Myo-chan. Tazuna's face went morbid as he rushed back to the edge of the project. He looked over and saw 3 kids huddled together in shock. If he remembered correctly, there were 4 children instead of 3. A girl was missing from the group. A little girl is trapped inside the building. What? A male worker shouted as he looked over. He noticed the building in its state as his face went serious. "We have to get her out of there. All right, everyone, follow." Tazuna stopped once he saw Konan dash through the beams and jump. She offered almost no patience for the rest of the builders as she turned into hundreds of papers and flew to the crumbled mess that was once a home. Once she reached the building, she formed back into herself from her waist up and asked the children, "Where was she when you last saw her?" They were too scared to speak, so they pointed into the collapsed area in the same direction. Konan narrowed her eyes and dispersed herself into hundreds of papers again, and flowing herself through the entire building, going through all of the nooks and crannies that the building had to offer. After about 10 or 15 seconds, one of the papers attached itself to a human figure huddled into a corner of the building, lightly sobbing to herself. All of the rest of the paper came to the one piece that found the girl and slowly formed itself into Konan again. After 10 seconds or so, Konan was kneeling down next to the girl looking at her feeble figure. The space was a tight squeeze, but had enough room to fit another person in it before it became uncomfortable. "Are you all right?" the Jounin asked the little brown-haired girl. The girl lifted her head up to reveal watery green eyes and lightly nodded her head. Konan stared at the girl and thought, "Good, at least she's uninjured. All right, I'm going to help get you out of here. I'll be right back," the woman replied to the feeble girl. As soon as Konan got up to leave, the little girl grabbed the Jounin's sleeve tightly and started crying onto the woman. "Please, don't leave me alone. I am scared." Konan felt a pang in her chest. It was an unusual feeling, but it was a feeling that gave her a forlorn look on her face. She couldn't place her finger on it, but the feeling was something familiar. After brooding for a moment, she began to speak in a gentle tone. "Don't worry, I will protect you and get you out of here safely. I promise." When she said those words, she put on a slight smile that made the girl stop crying almost instantaneously. She tried once more to get up only to have the little girl grip on her sleeve even tighter than before. Another grief-stricken look appeared on the Jounin's face as she stared back down at the girl. "Don't go. Please stay with me." That statement caused her to hesitate. Should she really leave a child in here alone? It would only be a moment before Konan was back. But what if something happened to the little girl while she was outside, relaying the information of the young girl's condition? After another moment, Konan created a paper clone of herself that then dispersed through the rubble to tell the other workers of the child's location and the damage. After about 5 minutes or so, the workers finally pulled the shambles apart to reveal a quiet Konan with a female child cuddling beside her. Many of the workers' faces lit up upon seeing the young girl was safe. When Konan pulled herself out of the building with the girl cradled in her arms, Tazuna put on a relieved grin. "I checked her for any problems, and she is fine," the blue-haired woman replied to Tazuna and the rest of the workers. "That's good," Tazuna responded with a sigh. "Anyone else in there?" "No, it was just the girl and I," Konan retorted rather tiredly. Tazuna looked at the girl cradled in the Jounin's arms and grew a warm smile at the picture. "So, the woman does have a heart after all," he thought quietly watching the scene before him. "Mayo-chan, my precious daughter, where are you?" "Mommy." The girl yelped happily in the direction of her mother's voice. Pushing through the crowd of people that gathered at the site was a woman with long brown hair and dark pine green eyes. "Oh-Mayo-chan, there you are." The woman came up to her daughter and almost teared up at the revelations of the young girl's cuts and bruises. The girl ripped herself from Konan's arms and ran to her mother with a wide smile on her face. The mother saw her daughter and opened her arms to allow the little girl to jump in them freely. Once a few tears were shed from the couple, the girl burst with excitement and pointed at Konan. "Mommy, mommy, that woman saved me." "Oh, really?" the woman answered with an exaggerated smile. She then cast her gaze upwards and soon found a lock of eyesight with the blue-haired woman. A slight frown began to form on Konan's features once she saw the girl's mother produce a scowl emanating a disgusted pressure. "Mommy, are you all right?" the girl asked her mom, who quickly shed her disgust and put on a warm front as if her actions earlier never happened. "Of course, dear. I am fine now that you're safe," she replied cheerily while snuggling her nose to her daughter's hair. She nuzzled back and forth a few times until a slight rub across something foreign caught the woman's interest as she opened her eyes. "Miyoko, what is this?" The girl's grin spread even wider. "Oh, that nice woman gave it to me. Isn't it pretty?" The mother looked in the young child's hair and saw a white origami flower wrapped into her hair in a similar style that Konan used herself. A light frown appeared on the woman's face as she peered over to the Jounin that saved her daughter's life. A fraction of a second later, the mother pulled the flower from the girl's hair and tossed it on the ground, but not without a temper tantrum from the little one held in her hands. "Mommy, what are you doing? That was mine, and that nice lady gave it to me. Enough. I will hear no more of this. We are going home," the woman sneered while she began taking steps away from the buildings. "Hey, wait a minute. Aren't you going to give the ninja a thank you or something?" Tazuna asked while raising one of his hands in the air, as if he was trying to flag her down. The The mother stopped in her tracks as she turned her head and gave a look that could kill, as if I would ever be grateful to someone like her. She then continued walking, leaving the builders to glare at her with revulsion. After another moment slipped by, the gray-haired man changed his face into one of disapproval. "What a hateful woman," Tazuna responded while sauntering himself over to the blue-haired jounin. Heaving a sigh while he did so, people have certainly changed nowadays. Konan didn't say anything. There was nothing to say, really. The woman knew who she was and treated her as if she were nothing more than a common rat. A sorrowful face took hold as the jounin silently walked over to the lone origami flower that was thrown on the ground and gently picked it up with an uneasy hand. Staring into the flower, she fell back into her thinking phase and tried to swallow it up. But the longer she dwelled on it, the harder it was to stifle her emotional cracks. A few moments passed before Tazuna walked over to Konan and put a hand on her shoulder. "Are you all right?" The gray-haired man asked with concern, trying to get a view of her face. Konan took the flower from her hand and gently let it fall apart in her grasp before she turned her face to view the worried man. "I'm fine." She then put on her emotionless face and tried hard not to cry as she started walking toward the half-built building. When she turned her body to walk, however, Tazuna could have sworn that he saw a tear fall from her eye. She had to get out of here, this village, because if she didn't soon, she would probably go mad. Space break. It was 9:30 at night, and there was still no sign of Konan. Naruto had gone through several ramen cups in his apartment just to try and stop his anxiousness. He tried to tell himself that it wasn't anything spectacular, that it was just because she had to work a little late than normal. It was his constant jitters that confused him, but all the same made him worry even more. Could she have been ambushed? No, she's much stronger than that. But she did say that she wasn't going to put up a fight if she did get jumped by someone, didn't she? She didn't say that she wasn't going to defend herself, though. Plus, the Hokage told the villagers that they couldn't mess with her. After running those thoughts through his head, his worrisome feelings left him for the time being. He had his typical orange ninja gear folded and put into a drawer as he felt more comfortable getting into something more house-appropriate. He put on some cargo shorts and a black shirt that had an imitation of the Uzumaki swirl on the front. The swirl was colored orange, as the boys' cargo shorts were a paste color. The blonde ripped the packaging of another ramen cup and began pouring water into it. After he finished that, he turned off the faucet and went over to the microwave to place his ramen cup on the turntable. He then closed the door with a click and pressed the 3 on the microwave, which beeped, and started cooking the ramen, counting down from 3 minutes. He sighed to himself at the unarrival of the blue-haired woman. Why was he so stressed out over this? He didn't even know her that well. He paced over to the couch and plopped himself onto the cushion in a tired manner. Was he really tired? He didn't do much today, but he felt as if the life had been drained from him. He looked out into the dimly lit street from his giant window and saw a person or two walk past his house now and then. The people in his village have softened to the idea of him being around. He remembered back to the time where no one ever came down his street unless it was absolutely necessary, but they would move rather hastily to avoid contact with the supposed demon that they feared. Now, when he sees people outside, it is as though the people are comfortable and even almost happy that they are walking down his street. A total mirror opposite of what was normal to Naruto back in the day. He looked over at the new bouquet placed on the windowsill that was left to him the night before after Konan remembered the others, turned to Ash and pondered her safety again. His gaze stared into the flowers in a spacey manner as he reminisced about the times when he was still a preteen. Things were so much simpler then. He didn't have to worry about anyone specifically after him. He didn't have to worry about doing anything he didn't want to do. It was just him and Team 7 doing missions and enjoying each other's company. Even though things were far from perfect, they were happy times. Now, it's as though things took a turn for the worst. Sasuke, a member of Team 7, defected from the Leaf. Kakashi already died once, and the Akatsuki came after the Jinchuriki and hunted him down, all because that Madara guy was in control the entire time. Flashback. Naruto shook his head as his Rinnegan faded into his normal ocean blue eyes. They still felt like they were pulsating, but it was slowly fading away through time. Nagato watched the boy as he composed himself and gained proper footing. After obtaining this kind of new power so quickly, the redhead knew that it took a little time to adjust. Naruto, he called, gaining the interest of the blonde. The Jinchuriki blinked a few times and looked upon the crippled man who had seriousness in his eyes, which was totally the opposite from a moment ago. There is a man that you have to look out for. He is the one behind everything. The collection of bijou and every other mission that was completed throughout Akatsuki was actually under authority of this man. His power is great, and he is a terrible threat to yours and Jiraiya-sama's vision of peace. Naruto didn't know what to say to that. He always thought Pain was the one behind it all, but it was this other man that the blonde didn't know. The boy grit his teeth, but continued to listen. He used me as a tool and used my pain and inner turmoil as a catalyst for his diabolical plan of world domination. I didn't know it right off the bat, but I overheard him while I was investigating his character. I didn't trust him the moment I laid my eyes on him and realized my suspicions were correct once I overheard him talking to another Akatsuki member, the one known as Zetsu. Nagato lowered his head in a shameful manner, but while learning his plans, my pain and hatred still overtook me, and I fell oblivious to the outcome of his scheme if it were to ever come to fruition. I only cared about creating peace through devastation and thought I could wipe him out whenever I had all of the Jinchuriki. Truth be told, before I ever fought you, the man came to me ordering that it was time to capture you. I had an idea of his plans then, and it made it even worse because I already knew who you were. It made me hesitant, but I had to comply. In this machine, Nagato threw his eyes to the floor. As much as it aids me, leaves me just as vulnerable if anyone were to ever attack. I had to act. Nagato, are you telling me that you knew what he was planning the entire time? Konan asked in a concerned voice. Nagato looked over to his teammate and gave her a light nod. That's right, Konan. But why didn't you tell me? I could have dashed. This is exactly why I didn't tell you. The Rinnegan wielder retorted with a calm tone. I knew you would overreact and try to abandon everything that the leader worked for. It would have been foolish, and you would have been killed upon treason. But Nagato dash. I understand, Konan, but you have to realize that there's a time and place for everything, and that time would have been irrational. I was only trying to protect you. The blue-haired woman had no rebuttal and fell deathly silent as she turned her view away from her friend. Naruto clenched his teeth even harder and began digging his fingers into his palms. Hearing their conversation that was passed between another was almost unbearable. This type of manipulation was unacceptable in his eyes. His own cousin was being used as some human meat puppet to a man that doesn't even appreciate it. Nagato, he growled in a deep tone. No one should ever have to go through something like that. That is why I'm telling you all of this, the redhead answered as he took in more shallow breaths. This man needs to be stopped. If he is not, then the world, as we know, will perish along with everyone in it. Name, Naruto whispered, causing the redhead to strain his hearing. What? Naruto looked up with an angry glare and spoke once more. His name. What is his name? Nagato raised his head and put on a deathly serious facade. His name is Madara Uchiha. In flashback, Madara Uchiha, the blonde repeated in his mind while breathing in the apartment scent that he started to grow accustomed to. That name was engraved into his memory and would never disappear no matter what happened. The things that man did to his cousin were almost unforgivable and would never fade away as quickly as Jiraiya's death. Click! Naruto was jolted from his thoughts as he pounced up to witness the source of the sound. His eyes widened once he gained a sight of the person he wanted to see this entire time. Konan was standing in front of the front door with a tired, but mentally tired look as she gazed to the floor. She looked as if she was spending a lot of time in thought, but who could really blame her, right? Naruto peered at her face and mimicked her slight frown that appeared on her features. Are you alright, Konan-chan? The blonde asked cautiously, trying to get a better glimpse of her reaction. She was completely silent and didn't answer Naruto's question or curious gaze. She just stayed in the same spot and looked to the floor as if something was going on down there. Naruto noticed this and tried to ask her another question to at least release the frozen atmosphere that was placed upon the room once she stepped in. Do you want anything to eat? I can buy you something if you don't want ramen. Konan clenched her fists tightly while obscuring her vision in between her blue locks. There was something on the inside that was threatening to burst forth any moment, but the woman was holding it and trying to keep her grasp on it as tightly as she could. Why do you call me that? Huh? Call you what? The blonde asked while scratching his head. He was confused of her question, and it left him quite baffled. He didn't remember calling her anything bad, so why did it feel like he was getting his head chewed off? The blue-haired Jounin only became even more irate than before. She gnashed her teeth, trying to hold back the emotion as she slowly stuttered out a sentence. Why did you put Chan at the end of my name? What is this? I can't control my stuttering. What's wrong with me? Naruto saw her face mixed in between sadness and fury and a tiny hint of confusion. There was something about her that made him feel uneasy, but he should try to cheer her up. Maybe making a smile will change it. He then grew a foxy grin from ear to ear and responded with clarity. I do that to all of my friends. There's that smile again. Why is he smiling? Friends. Her head raised up in a furious rage. Her facial features grew sharp with her eyes, widening angrily as her tone turned sour. Friends? How are we friends when you know nothing about me? But Konan-chan, No, you don't understand shit about me. She pointed her index finger stiffly at him, causing his eyes to widen. You weren't there when my parents were killed when I was only 8 years old. You weren't there when I was forced to look after myself, not knowing when my next meal would be or where I would lay my head the next night. You weren't there when Jiraiya-sama was training me and my friends. You weren't there when Yahiko was killed. You weren't even there when I was asking myself if things would get better, and they didn't. Naruto's frown deepened as she continued. So don't go saying that you can relate to me when you know nothing about me. She then threw her hands to her head and grabbed it in denial while closing her eyes. I can't stop myself. What is happening to me? This pain? It wasn't until a week ago that I first met you. So what gives you the right to say that you understand everything that has happened when you obviously don't? I've been through a lot more than you can comprehend. The things I've seen and witnessed will never leave my thoughts for as long as I live. Trust me. Naruto's frown sank even lower as she continued to belittle him. He began to look at his feet in shame and couldn't really say anything to her outburst. What could he say? She was right about the fact that he didn't know anything about her. She lived in an entirely different country than him, and he was thinking that things were similar between him and her. What was the same? I am sorry. Naruto managed to sputter out after an eerie silence took hold of the apartment. You're sorry? As if your excuse can do anything, she retorted while calming down slightly. No matter what apology you throw at me, it will never help me forget my times in utter hell. Then let me stop the hell from ever coming back. Naruto shouted out loud to the woman, who widened her eyes in surprise. His face saddened a little further before he spoke again. I realize that your life was harder than mine, and I know that I can't erase the pain you've gained through the years. He softened his eyes as he let their sight fall to the floor, slowly clenching and unclenching his hand in the process. But at least I can end it here. Does he honestly think he can just get up and end it now, like it will just go away forever? I can't. I just can't believe him. There's too much. It won't go away. It hurts. How can you end it if you don't even know who I am? Konan was still running on hysterics, but her voice level dropped dramatically. Her face seemed to be turning from anger to sadness. Then teach me who Konan-chan really is. Naruto fumed, making the Jounin freeze with a gasp caught in her throat. Teach me the one that cries at night all alone while others are enjoying the nights spent with their families. Teach me the kunoichi that had to swallow her emotions to live. Teach me the woman that never experienced happiness her entire life and lived as a scared child unsure of what would happen tomorrow. Naruto gazed at the floor, not really looking in any certain area. Although, a second later, a slight upward curve to his lips foreshadowed his continuation. He stared at her once again and spoke loudly. Let me stop the pain from ever coming back. You won't have to worry about it any longer because I will prevent anything from getting to you ever again, and that's a promise of a lifetime. Naruto produced a thumb and pointed to himself as he laid his trademark grin upon his face. And I'll tell you what, if you ever get this low in your life again and I can't change it, then I'll just kill myself. I can guarantee that much, because I never go back on my word. Konan gazed at Naruto, lost for words. Everything the blonde said was a lot to take in at once and was hitting it home to the blue-haired woman. She stood there for a second and tried to string a sentence together, although it was proving to be rather difficult since she felt a lump in her throat quickly form, keeping her voice from coming out. "Nah, no," was all she could utter at his response to her. Her mind was running in several different directions and didn't know which way was north. Naruto just said he wouldn't let her stoop this low again. He promised her. He looked so determined. That smile. I don't. What is? Impossible. I can't. Her face slowly started contorting itself, as if it was trying to do something, and Naruto quickly took notice of her altering features. Her face looked like she almost had a sneeze, but he highly doubted that was the case. Trust? It no I. Alone. Nah. Hutu. Ooh. Her face contorted even more as she gnashed her teeth in frustration. She couldn't believe it. Naruto was pulling at her as if he knew which chord strike in her heart. His sincerity towards her, he used it so flawlessly. It was so warm, so bright. She couldn't explain it. Her whole being was falling apart all because of Naruto's simple words. What was causing it? Was it the way he spoke? Or maybe it was because he was the prophetic one and had the linguistic power? She didn't really know at the moment because she couldn't focus. Her emotions were breaking through, which was something that has never truly surfaced in a long time. Her breathing turned into heaving. Her thoughts were incoherent. She tried to speak only to have nothing but his name come out. She was in shambles, but something was missing. Naruto's facial features lowered into a frown again as he took in her trembling body. The Jinchuriki stared at her. He could tell something was up, something he knew that only one thing could cure. After contemplating momentarily, he walked over slowly to her as she stood there making failed attempts at composing herself. "Konan-chan." The blonde replied, getting Konan to raise her head and get a glimpse of him. Her eyes widened exponentially once she felt the blonde ninja wrap his arms around her, pulling her into him. It was one thing when he said those powerful words, but it was entirely another thing when it came to physical contact. There was only one other that could even get as far as the blonde did, but he passed away years ago. She would never let anyone else do something to her like this. Her instincts took over as she automatically retaliated his hug, trying to pry the boy off of her. "I'll let go me. You bastard, get your hands off of me." Her voice trembled while she began to punch him in the head with her hands. But that was proving to be useless as the boy held on for dear life. "You don't have to hold it in anymore, Konan-chan. Let it go," the blonde murmured to the Jounin, who was still trying her best to rip herself free. "Let me go. Damn it, The blue-haired woman screamed as she began to lose herself. His comforting embrace was having an enormous effect on her, and no matter how badly she wanted to get away from him, she wanted to stay in his arms just as much. She craved it. She longed for it. She was hurting on the inside and pushed over the precipice. Something had to give. Her eyes closed tightly as her punches became less and less dangerous until they were nothing but light taps to his noggin. It wasn't long before all of her strength faded from hitting the boy and changed into her strength to embrace him back as tightly as she could. I hum. Her overflowing dam of tears finally broke forth as her emotional wall caved in. She finally began to sob uncontrollably onto him, dampening his shirt in the process, proving to be something that was long needed. Her crying spree was massive as all of that pent-up stress, anger, sadness, loneliness, grief, and scared feelings poured out onto Naruto's black shirt. There, Konan-chan," Naruto whispered soothingly into her ear, shifting his left hand to the back of her head and pushing her into his chest while rubbing her hair calmly. "Everything will be okay." Naruto carefully moved the hug onto the couch as she continued wailing onto him. As it turned out, he was absolutely right about what she needed, and it was well-deserved, just as he imagined it to be, although he got a little roughed up in the process. Everyone needed a hug like this eventually, even if they were an enemy bent on destroying other nations. So he let her cry and cry to her heart's content. He wouldn't leave her until she was absolutely finished. Needless to say, that proved to be a while, because his ramen was never taken out of the microwave for the rest of the night. Morning time crept through the dusty windows of an apartment. The light bounced from the floor and lit all of the rooms in a bright early light. The inside of the apartment was cool in temperature, and the sun's rays that fell and gave the flat a homely feeling. The usual cacophony of bird calls seeped its way into the house, leaving a calm atmosphere to encase the entire building. Workers and ninja who were busy building houses hit their hammers and sanded their floors, and that sound also carried through the walls, but was muffled to a light beating sound with more bass than anything. The light, through time, traveled all the way to a young woman's face as she lay there sleeping peacefully. Her blue hair was disheveled from the tossing and turning that one would normally go through while sleeping. Her flak jacket was tossed over next to the wall, leaving only her black long-sleeved shirt with the lone Uzumaki swirl on her left arm on her, as well as her ninja pants. Her leaf headband was left on a nightstand that stood beside the mattress, and her sandals were tucked away into a corner. Konan. She quickly opened her eyes and shot up in the bed. Once she did, she lifted a hand to her head in an attempt to staunch the morning headache. It must have been due to all of the crying she did the night before, so she closed her eyes and rubbed them a few times to get a better view of her surroundings. Her view was bleary at first, but it eventually cleared up into her normal field of vision. The sun didn't really help much because it was truly bright in her eyes. It was never this bright in Amage Cure because of all of the constant rainfall, but she had to admit it was a better feeling than waking up to storm clouds and rain. She put a hand to her face to block the brightness and walked over to the window. While closing the blinds, she slowly began to recall what happened the night before, although she couldn't remember anything of the time she was angry. A sigh escaped from her lips as she changed her pace to go to the bathroom and take a shower. She turned on the water to the right temperature and took off her clothes. Once she finished undressing herself, she stepped inside. After feeling the warm water cascade down her body, she continued thinking about what happened last night. That was truly the lowest point in her life, and she could vouch for that. She had never once broken down on someone so freely like she did the night before. She never had to. But after reaching that point in her life where she had no one else who knew who Konan really was, she couldn't help it. She almost lost herself. All of her friends were gone, and she also aided in killing Jiraiya, the only father figure she could really confide in since her parents' deaths. It was a real weight on her and a big sadness on her heart. But oddly enough, she didn't feel like crying about it. Maybe it was from her crying session the night before. A slight smile formed on her mouth at Naruto's recklessness to help her. She had to give the kid respect for trying something so bold, but she couldn't deny the fact that she enjoyed it. It was calming, and she relished every moment from that time. If people were to question her if she liked the boy, she would decline it. She had no real interest in love ever since her last boyfriend died, and wasn't planning on having another anytime soon, if at all. Not only that, but Naruto was way younger than her, basically a decade younger. She would be pushing pedophilia if she ever thought of a relationship with someone his age. What on earth am I thinking? She thought with a slight snort and a shake of her head. There was no way she could ever see that happening, and even mentally laughed at the thought coming up. Speaking of Naruto, I wonder if he's awake. We will have to continue on his lessons today. She stepped out of the shower and dried herself. She put on the clothes she had the night before, but not without mentally complaining at the lack of wardrobe, knowing that her clothes probably stink. She stepped out of the bathroom and into her room where the rest of her clothes were. Afterwards, she put on her flak jacket and zipped it to the top. She then picked up her leaf attire and wrapped it around her forehead, tying it into a knot with its tails to secure in place. After she dressed herself, she slipped on her sandals and walked out of her room. Naruto's room was across from her own, so it wasn't much of a travel. She knocked on his door and awaited a response. When none came, she opened his door and took a peek inside. He could sleep as hard as a rock, for all she knows, so why not check? She creaked the door open and peered inside. She then heaved a sigh and opened the door all of the way. He wasn't there. His room was completely empty and was also messy to boot. She hissed in disapproval, but silently closed his door until she heard a click. Dirty and messy things were a pet peeve for her, as she was always a neat and tidy type. Now, she could only guess he was in the living room waiting on her to get up. She took a few steps until she came around a corner and made her way to the living room. Hey, near a dash. She stopped abruptly once she stepped the corner. No one was in the living room, either. A small frown appeared on her face at this new development as she stood there, taking in the view. He must have been called for something important, she mused silently. After contemplating a little more on whether or not to go outside, her stomach grumbled lightly. She shook her head once she remembered she went straight home and didn't bother to grab anything to eat. She also mentally kicked herself for not eating once she got home too. Knowing that there was probably food in Naruto's kitchen, she turned around in a 180 and went to the cabinets. But what she saw when she turned around took her breath away. She slowly walked over to the dinner table and saw an object placed on the surface. She couldn't understand how she didn't see it earlier. It was literally something that screamed attention. Its design was almost perfect. She couldn't even speak, it was so beautiful. What lay in the center of the table was an orange-colored origami flower with a note beside it. She picked up the flower and looked at it in awe. She knew it had to have been from the orange-clad boy himself, because for one, Naruto was the only one living there other than her, and two, he would have been the only one to pick orange out of all of the colors in the color wheel. He was the only ninja that wore orange all of the time. She placed the flower back down on the table and picked up the note in its place. She began to read the contents, going over everything as slowly as she could. Dear Konan-chan, I hope you like it. You lost your old flower, so I thought I would make you a new one. I know it's not much, and seems like a sad attempt to apologize for my short-minded thinking, but I hope that you can forgive me for what I've done. I'm sorry. Naruto. A small upward curve graced her lips as she read the note once more. His apology was so childish, bearing something handmade and a note that lay beside it. But something about the apology made her happy on the inside. Naruto actually took the time to make an origami flower, which is something that is not relatively easy, and judging from the way Naruto is, he didn't know a thing about origami. That can only mean he spent quality time on it. Konan was an origami master, so she could easily make another flower if she wanted to. But after her fight with Toby, she lost the motivation to even make another one for herself. So she was really awed at the fact that he even remembered, let alone bothered to make one for her. After concentrating on what she wanted to do, she snorted to herself in defeat and gave a pitiful smile of acceptance to the flower. She wrapped the right side of her hair into a bun, picked up the flower, and placed the orange piece into the bun to keep it in place. Content with another flower in her hair after a week and 2 days without having one, she moved herself around the table to the cabinets and tried to find something to eat. Lucky enough for her, there were canned and packaged foods that lined Naruto's cabinets from one end to the other, to where she didn't have to rely on eating nothing but ramen. She fixed herself a plate of proportionate foods from different cans and whatever else she found that she wanted to eat, and dug in. Once she finished, she washed her plate and put it back into the cabinet she found it in and sat on the couch to wait patiently. If Naruto was out doing something important, then it really didn't matter if she went out or not, because her appearance wouldn't really change anything. He reminds me so much of Yahiko, Konan whispered quietly. Thinking of Naruto's linear thought processes let the woman reminisce with a nostalgic feeling. It was almost as if she were still there during the time she was younger. Back when they were kids, the orange-haired kid went off on his own a lot without telling them, and usually left Nagato and her worried. He would always come back and have some overthought apology, which really held no water, and he would get chewed out by both of them. But in the end, they forgave him, and it only made their relationship grow for one another. Eventually, all of those times are what brought her and Yahiko's relationship to the next level. His carelessness for battle damage and going out there not worried of the repercussions really stuck with her. He was reckless, but devoted to his country and protecting his friends. A true hero. Hey, Konan-chan, I'm back. The blonde's voice broke her out of her train of thought. She sat up as a small smile etched onto her face. Believe it or not, she wanted to see the blonde brat, even though he totally invaded her space the night before. But when she looked onto him, something that she would have never expected was revealed to her. Her eyes widened as far as they could go. It was almost earth-shattering upon seeing something like this. It was almost inconceivable. She fell backwards onto the couch and laid there, trying to say something, but the shock really set itself in. What? Naruto blatantly asked, shifting closer to the blue-haired woman. He didn't like it when people did things like this, but never actually said anything. What is it? Come on, tell me. Space break. Orange. Yamato looked over to Kakashi with a confused expression, who looked back at him, just as confounded as he was. As soon as the blonde found out his predicament, he rushed over to Kakashi's and Yamato's tent to figure out his problem. The blue-haired woman trailed behind the Jinchuriki, wanting to know about it just as much as Naruto did. So, Konan, Kakashi, and Yamato were all in the same tent looking at the Uzumaki with puzzled reactions. The brown-haired ANBU has never seen anything like this before, so he had to ask, "Naruto, how did you get orange hair?" "I don't know," the orange-haired boy replied in concern. "Konan-chan was the one who pointed it out to me. I just learned about it a few minutes ago." The Uzumaki was hurt at knowing that his hair changed from the blonde that he loved to a carrot orange color that he never really wanted. Blonde was his pride. He was basically the only blonde-headed boy in the entire Leaf Village, so it made him happy that he wasn't like the others. He didn't feel monotonous with his yellow hair. Even though orange was uncommon in the Leaf Village, blonde was more awesome in his opinion. "Well, can you tell us exactly what happened the last few days?" Kakashi asked the blonde, now orange-headed boy. Naruto thought for a minute before he brought up anything. "Well, all I've been doing recently is training on my Rinnegan powers. I haven't really done anything else." Yamato looked over to Kakashi again before going into a thinking phase, placing his hand to his chin. "This only further solidifies our conclusions from the other day. I have to agree completely with you." The silver-haired Jounin responded with a nod. "That is exactly what it is." "Wait, can someone fill me in? I'm kinda lost," the orange-haired boy asked curiously, but with annoyance. Yamato stopped his thought processes and looked at the boy with a somewhat serious look on his face. "Remember when we checked on you the other day for any abnormal behavior regarding the Rinnegan?" After he received a head shake in approval, he continued, "Well, Kakashi and I talked about how the Uzumaki carried the Rinnegan as a Kekkai Genkai, and, well, your hair change must have something to do with your awakening of the Rinnegan. That is, if we are correct." Kakashi intervened, gaining the interest of the wood user. "If Yamato is thinking the same thing as myself, then your Rinnegan has awakened your Uzumaki side of your genetics and placed equal dominance amongst your blonde side." The Uzumaki were known for their red hair. Yamato answered, continuing Kakashi's statement. "We know it sounded a little too simple, but in other words, your Uzumaki red hair genes dominated with your blonde genes equally, making your hair orange." Naruto gazed into space after he heard that. He was a little sad knowing that his trademark blonde hair was replaced with a medium orange color. But after thinking a little longer, he realized it was something small and an after effect of the Rinnegan. He couldn't always have the best of both worlds, so he swallowed his pride and gave a smile. "Well, I guess I can't complain." He then put his hands in his pockets. "That only means my mom's side is finally coming in." "Hold on," Kakashi said, cutting Naruto off before he could say any more. "What makes you think that it's your mother's hair?" "Oh," Naruto responded, growing a huge foxy grin from ear to ear. "I met the fourth Hokage." All three of the other participants in the room widened their eyes in surprise. No one really suspected that answer to come forth. Yamato and Kakashi knew what happened to Minato, and Konan had a basic idea as to what really happened. After a second, Naruto continued. "He's the one who stopped me from becoming the nine-tailed beast. But isn't the fourth Hokage dead?" Konan blurted out, looking very confused to the others in the room. "Well, not much is known about the Shiki Fujin technique," Kakashi responded while gazing over to the blue-haired woman. "I'm guessing he must have put some of the last of his energy into Naruto before he died. He told me," Naruto began while staring intensely onto Kakashi, "that the guy in the mask from Akatsuki was the man behind the Fox attack 16 years ago. He said that he was so strong that not even he could do anything to stop him." Kakashi and Yamato immediately remembered the swirling masked man that they fought during their hunt for Sasuke. "He's right, Kakashi-san," Konan told the silver-haired man. "That man is the true leader of Akatsuki. He has worked in the shadows and bided his time until the time came for him to carry forth his plans. He used Nagato. It is all just some game to him. But if he used pain, then he is most likely using Sasuke too." The boy retorted with venom flowing from his syllables. "It just as Jiraiya feared." The silver-haired man answered with a grim look to his features. "That's who was behind the attack 16 years ago. Madara Achin." Naruto's eyes widened in realization. That's who Pain told me to watch for. Who is he exactly? Madara Uchiha was the former leader of the Uchiha clan who was supposedly defeated by the first Hokage. He is the only one with enough hate for our village to do something like this. Kakashi looked over to Yamato. We're going to have to tell the elders. Yamato nodded his head in agreement. What bad timing too, since what happened to Tsunade-sama this morning. Everything went silent for the orange-haired boy as he replayed that last message. What? What happened to Bachan? No one told you. The captain asked the orange-clad boy. When he received a headshake in rejection, he looked over to Kakashi, who looked onto him with a look of pity, then turned his head again to face Naruto and responded, she had a relapse. What? Naruto asked in a voice that held denial. What do you mean? Bachan was doing fine. What happened? Yamato knew the boy held some dear feelings for the Hokage, so he knew that Naruto wouldn't have automatically accepted that fact that was laid on the table. It seems as though she hasn't fully recovered from her fight with Pain. Kakashi looked over to the orange-haired boy while Yamato continued. We only received the news recently, but from what we've heard, she didn't wake up this morning. That only means that she has fallen into another coma. Naruto lowered his gaze. Well, can I see her? Sure, Kakashi replied with an eye smile. I don't see why not. You don't have anything else to do right now, and we don't need you for anything else. All right then. Naruto yelled in excitement. I'm off to see Bachan. Later, he then dashed out of the tent with pep in his step. Konan looked over to the Jinchuriki's exit and contemplated. He seems to be troubled. The blue-haired woman noticed that Naruto tried to cheer himself up. He was sad 1 minute, but all of a sudden changed it into a grin and brushed it off as though it was nothing to worry about. If this were a couple of days ago, Konan wouldn't have noticed that, but now it's as if she all of a sudden gained an extra sense. Maybe I should follow him. Konan turned and went for the front flaps of the tent when an audible voice stopped her. Hold on, we have to talk to you for a minute. She turned around and saw the silver-haired man signaling for her to come back. Konan, while holding a flap in her grasp, looked outside again and saw the orange ninja running further away. She looked outward until he disappeared from view and inwardly sighed before letting go of the flap and turning back to Kakashi. Well, that's it for today. I hope you all enjoyed this content. If you do, please leave a like, share, and comment anything you want, because more you comment, it motivate me to upload more content. And make sure to check out the author of this story. All details and description.